Welcome to the panel room. Today we're talking about martial arts in writing. Before we get into it though, let's go around the room, let everyone introduce themselves and their connection with the martial arts. So I'll go ahead and start with you, Jeannie.
Oh, well, hello everybody. I'm Jeanne Adams. I write urban fantasy and paranormal romantic suspense, and I write space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott, who's also on the panel. And I am a high red belt in Taekwondo, getting ready to test for black. And I also have done ninjutsu.
All right, perfect. Ed?
Hi, I'm Ed McKeown. I'm a science fiction writer, specializing in alien worlds and artificial intelligences. My connection with martial arts is I'm an instructor with Thundering Wave Martial Arts, Chinese Kung Fu. I spend 2 or 3 nights a week out there trading punches and kicks with people much younger than me. I specialize in ancient weapons, swords, spears, quans, and various other Chinese specialties.
All right, Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Maberry. I'm a multi-genre writer, novelist, as well as comic book writer. I've got a pretty long history of martial arts. Just entered my 58th year, I think, though I'm semi-retired now. Jiu-jitsu is my primary art, kenjutsu, and a few other things over the years. I was a bodyguard in the entertainment industry for years, back in the day, a bouncer. I taught martial arts history at Temple University for 14 years. And women's self-defense and specialty classes. So over the last few decades, I've written training manuals for SWAT and special forces. And I was the expert witness for the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office for murder cases that involved martial arts. So I've got a pretty extensive background. I've written 700 or 800 articles for martial arts magazines and about 15 nonfiction books on martial arts as well.
Perfect. Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee Martindale. I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer, anthology editor, and small press publishing editor. My connection to the martial arts, aside from the fact I'm still alive, is a fencing member of the Sifwa Musketeers. I'm involved with the SCA. I target shoot if we get into firearms. And well, as I said, I'm still alive.
All right, perfect. Nancy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Northcott, and I have a sneaking suspicion that I am the baby of the martial arts crowd on the panel tonight. I have a high blue belt in Taekwondo and had to stop studying after 7 or 8 years because after my 3rd injury, I thought maybe my body's trying to tell me something. But I love writing about it. I'm a multi-genre writer. The Herald of Day starts a series that has magical action, but not martial arts. And the others pictured around me are the first books in series that do involve characters using martial arts.
All right. And finally, Bryan.
My name is Bryan Tann. I am a multi-genre author. I have been studying martial arts since I was 8 years old. My very first art was Taekwondo. I then moved on to Tung Sudo, studying at CS Kim Karate. I boxed for many years, did wrestling. I earned my 1st degree black belt, the rank of Shodan in Sullivan's American Kempo, an offshoot of Professor Nick Serio's style. I also was a corrections officer for 3.5 years, as well as a lead officer doing hospital security, where I was among the lead trainers in self-defense and restraint tactics. I tend to write martial arts. I incorporate different forms of martial arts within my books. And to gain my 1st degree black belt, I also had to become proficient in both Brazilian and traditional jiu-jitsu.
Okay. So my first question, and I'll start with you, Ed. Martial arts tends to be very visual. How do you translate that to the page?
Well, as you do everything in writing, by vivid expository writing. What I usually find is that less is more in this regard. The reader is not interested in the details of the arm break or whether you used a particular technique. What they want, I think, is that underlying verity, that you have some idea of how this stuff works. So you try to avoid the movie cliches of leaping in the air and kicking somebody in the side of the head in the temple and many other things that usually don't work. And when they don't work, usually leave you in horrible circumstances.
All right, Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree with the expository writing, concept. It's pretty much all of us will agree with that. But I don't. I follow a slightly different path in terms of how I write it. I'm more of the John D. MacDonald school. If you've ever read any of the Travis McGee novels, he actually does pause at times without breaking pace, pause to give a little bit of information about how something works and what it will do to the body and so on. But the trick is to do it so it doesn't disrupt the pace. I write a lot of fight scenes. I've written, today I finished my 44th novel, literally 2 hours ago.
Hey,
Hey,
congratulations.
Congrats, man.
It did
That's
end with a
awesome.
fight scene. I like fight scenes that are believable. Everything that happens in my fight scene, even if I am writing a fight scene in a fantasy story where somebody's fighting a monster, there's going to be an interior logic based on physics, physiology, anatomy, psychology. I studied those as part of the martial arts that I was training in, and also I made my students study those fields as well, so that if a character does something, there is a cause and effect that's believable. And the fight scene should, in fact, advance the plot and deepen our understanding of the characters, not just be an action oasis in the middle, because that's kind of a cheap shot. I want every scene that involves action to drive the narrative and deepen our understanding of who these characters are, what their stakes are, and what they're feeling. And those elements go into fight scenes that I write.
All right, perfect. Lee?
One of again, I agree with everybody about give them enough idea of what's going on that you're showing, not telling. One of the things I like to use is almost an internal dialogue, because the character in the fight knows how it feels, knows when it's not feeling right, and a bit of internal dialogue keeps it from getting, okay, first A, then B, then C. I want to write the feel of the fight. So that seems to have worked for me.
All right. Nancy?
one thing I keep in mind as I go into a fight scene is what is the character's goal going into the fight? Why are they in this fight? Why does it matter? I like to make it a little harder for them as we go through. And as Jonathan says, the pace is really important. So I do put in a little bit of an internal here and there as we go through it. And I try to just use simple descriptions of the movements because I don't want the reader trying to sit there thinking, okay, what now? I want them to just be following along as we go. And then at the end, it has to matter. If the hero's pounded to a pulp, he's got to react from there with that. And I'm sure everybody on the panel does that, but every once in a while you read a book where somebody didn't. And it's kind of like, did you forget your hero was just over there? That happened? And so that's the main thing to me is what does the fight mean to the character and how does that meaning figure in as we go along?
All right. Bryan.
I actually act out the fights. I do, before I put it down on paper, I do the choreography. I do choreography as the hero character and as the villain. Each character has their own sort of fighting style because, as it's already been alluded to, you have to have the why your character is fighting. The fight also has to be integral to the story. Otherwise, it's action pornography, in my opinion. So, and then I try to write it in a way that whether someone is a martial artist or isn't a martial artist, it makes sense. So sometimes I write it relatively basic and I give the aftermath. So if I have my character Bryce Creed kick someone in the leg, I'll even say, he noticed his, the opponent's knee buckled, setting him up for, whatever, something along those lines to keep it still interesting without boggling it down with detail on top of detail on top of detail.
All right. And Jeannie.
Well, I don't have much to add to everybody's wonderful advice. Like Bryan, I tend to act them out, and my poor husband has to go through all these scenes with me, and he's not a martial artist, so he's usually like, I need to put my hands where? But the thing I always try to remember too is remembering that our characters, if our character in the action position is a martial artist, but the person they're facing is not, to remember that those people are going to react differently than somebody who knows a martial art.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if your character is a self-defense person versus a martial artist, our innate knowledge of our own martial arts may make us either too simplistic or too complicated. And I then have to go back sometimes in editing and go, well, my character wouldn't know that, or his or her opponent wouldn't know that. I know it, but they wouldn't. So that's my only addition to the lovely comments everybody made, is that sometimes you have to be careful about what your characters know and don't versus what you know and don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a practicing martial arts instructor, I have one advantage that Bryan alluded to, which is particularly if we're doing a mass fight, I can just get the entire class to attack me. And in fact, in one of my books, Was Once a Hero, we had a mass fight of about 20, 30 individuals. And we did, in fact, act it out. We had 3D instructors in the center, and we had people rushing at us from all directions. And there's a psychology that gets demonstrated in such a thing, which then I was able to feed into the book, which is that some people hang back, some aggressively charge in, some wait on the edges looking for an opportunity, some don't ever really engage. And you get to see how that plays out in a group. So, having, 30 or 40 people that are willing to try and mug you can be useful.
That's great. What great homework.
All right, yeah. So now in today's class, everyone attacks seafood.
Exactly.
I won't say there weren't some bumps and bruises that came along with this, particularly since we were using clubs and knives, but it made for a much more vivid and exciting scene in the writing of it.
What we do for our art, right?
Exactly.
I tell you the truth, I hate when I see, whether it be movies or books, where they allude to the person fighting as just never being touched. You want to get more inaccurate. I don't care how good you are, you're getting hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care if you in the Matrix, you getting hit.
Yeah.
So
Muhammad Ali got hit. We all
yes,
get
he
hit.
did.
Yeah.
Bruce
Yeah.
Lee was hit.
Absolutely.
So
Well, and Jackie Chan, I think, has broken things and just
Jackie
doing
Chan has broken everything.
Yeah.
They actually had to name some bones so that they could say, well, I broke that one. Yeah. Hitherto, nobody had ever broken that bone, so it had been relevant.
All right, well, that kind of leads into the next one, how to balance the realism versus the good fiction, because of course you want your story to be good. And I'll start with you, Jonathan. Do you include, how much realism do you include? As Bryan was saying, you're going to get hit, it's going to hurt, things are going to break, but do you want that happening to your hero?
Yes.
Or villain?
Well, partly because, I as I mentioned earlier, I spent 5 years as a bodyguard in the entertainment industry. I have been chopped in the shoulder with a meat cleaver, stabbed, run over with a car. I've got plenty of scars, and I've broken my share of bones too. And also I spent some years as a bouncer and, had a lot of confrontations. It is true that most often you do get hit. And if the guy has a knife, almost always you're going to get cut, even if you win that fight. A knife is an easy weapon to use to inflict damage. It isn't as easy to kill someone with it unless you know what you're doing. So you tend to get cut anyway. But when I'm constructing these scenes, I don't put anything in my fight scene that is not possible. Most of my books, like I have my Joe Ledger series, which has 12 books in the series. The newest one is right behind me. 12 books in the series. I'm about to do the 13th. There's fight scenes all through each book. I don't want them the same. I want them different, but I'm not going to err on the side of pure entertainment to create an exciting fight scene. It's on me as a writer and on me as a martial arts expert to craft a scene where each fight scene has that interior logic. Everything that happens can happen given the circumstances. Now, if the hero is fighting a genetically engineered vampire, okay, that character is going to be harder to hurt, stronger, faster. How does somebody beat a stronger, faster opponent? It can be done. You go into the psychological aspects there, because somebody who is stronger and faster assumes they're going to win. There's this arrogance of power. It's a similar concept to what we teach in women's self-defense. Guys do not assume a woman will be a good enough fighter to stop them, so they don't generally attack in a way, with a good solid guard and good angles. They want to dominate, and a woman who's trained can use that arrogance against them. Well, a character fighting a more powerful opponent can use that against them, because that same arrogance of power exists in the psychology of the story. And you can find ways to front load the fight scene by mentioning little bits and pieces of personality, of psychological reaction, so that by the time you get to the fight scene, you don't have to info dump it all right there. But I don't put anything in a fight scene that isn't realistic. And it pisses me off when I see fight scenes that are not realistic. Good example of that, Lord of the Rings, or the Hobbit movie, when they're all the dwarves are running around fighting Smaug, and they hide behind a stone pillar when Smaug is breathing fire. That's a fight scene. They're in metal armor. Essentially, they would be cooked meat, whether the flame hit them or not. It's one of those things that it's so stupid, like the old Jeff Speakman movies when he was trying to be the next Chuck Norris, where he'd knife 60 feet and get a kill. No, that is not possible.
Physics, we don't need no stinking physics.
Right. I don't like any fight scene where I, as an expert watching, am going to be disappointed. I don't put the high kicks in, and I don't put jump spinning kicks in, because I know my own experiences. If somebody threw a high kick at me, and I was a bodyguard during the martial arts craze of the 70s and 80s, their foot's up here. I'm 6'4", their foot's up here. Their groin's right down there. Thank you. My character's going to exploit that. He's going to speed bag those testicles for quite a while, be entertained with it. It's not going to be a high kick is going to take a guy out.
What a horrible expression, speed bag the testicle. I'm going to have chills with that one for a while.
Meanwhile, I told my kid when he asked me if he could ever beat me in a fight, I said, Daddy will speed bag your coin purse.
So when crafting a fight scene, yes, you want to put inventive things in, you want to put different techniques in each fight, but you still have to stay in the realm of realism. Otherwise, you're making a fool out of the reader for their suspension of disbelief.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we end up with when you're reading a fight scene. If you have any experience in martial arts, is and speaking to our audience out, don't do this, where you have somebody, throwing the elegant high kicks and, the axe kick that brings the opponent down. And I'm like, yeah, no. And also, so often they have female martial artists at an extreme disadvantage, and they seldom are. If they know what they're doing, I liked that phraseology, Jonathan, of the arrogance of power. If you are a female martial artist, you are taught how to use that against your opponent. And
I am old. I'm fat, and I've been a paraplegic for 30 years. People think that easy target is printed across the forehead. As you say, Jonathan, if someone is trying to get in my face and is leaning down to do so, your average 6'4" person, think about where me sitting at about 4 or 5. Think about where a straight arm punch would go.
Right in the entertainment center. Yep.
I mean, even me, it took me until 23, 24 years of age to reach 5'8". So when the tall 6-foot+ football player would come and try to lean on me to get in my face, I'm like, bro, I've already won. You're just too dumb to realize it. Your kneecaps you have no knee anymore.
Yeah. You just lost your college scholarship.
Exactly.
The thing is, that's one of the things I like to put in fight scenes. Identify one weakness of the villain
Exploit it.
and it's usually arrogance, because I run into that so much. If they having them underestimate the opponent is the opponent's best weapon.
Yeah.
If somebody underestimates me, I've won.
One thing
And it works in print. It works wonderfully in print.
And you beat them up, then send them a thank you card for it because they helped you win that fight. That's great.
Well, as disgusting as Joss Whedon is, he made a career of that in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Of course.
He always presented Buffy as this little petite demure thing who, she was stronger than she looked, even for a Slayer. And then she knew how arrogant you were, so she would attack your arrogance to throw you off your game. You know, and I mean, I know my main protagonist in my Path of Redemption series, Bryce Creed, I mean, he's 6'4", 250. So he's basically the size of, you know, an instigator, but he's very cocky. Like he'll be the first person to tell you he's cocky. But when he's going up against a 9-foot tall werewolf, yeah, because he's cocky, he's going to try to match power with it. And then when that's not working, he has to dig down deep and fight smart. So I really do, at least with him, I try to make every fight as realistic as possible. But I also have it where, you know, if you have a vampire fight a human, obviously the vampire is going to win 10 times out of 10, unless the human somehow gets lucky. But when going up against other creatures of the night, yeah, he's got to be smarter, and he tends to, you know, he tends to suffer for it, but he sometimes also fights like a brute because he knows how to fight. But
one of my favorite panels that I went to at Dragon Con was put on by the Palmetto Knights, and who are, for those who don't know, a medieval, early modern steel combat team. And it was a panel by the women of the Palmetto Knights fighting medieval steel combat for women. And it was very interesting because they talked about this arrogance of power thing when they come up against men who haven't fought them before. The woman who had the most experience on the panel was about 5'6". And she said, here's the thing, my center of gravity is way lower than his. It's going to be easy for me to take him down. Mm-hmm. And they addressed the issues of the strength differential, the center of gravity, the balance, and I filed all that away. Because you're crazy if you go to things like that and you don't file it away. And in my opinion, you're crazy if you go to Dragon Con and you're interested in fight scenes, you don't go to anything like that because it's like, it's free. It's school for free. But I've read books that will remain nameless where characters did things that I knew they couldn't do, that's not possible. A ballerina could pull off that move, but not while wreaking havoc at the same time. It's just not gonna work. And I love cop shows, love TV shows with fights and explosions. My husband just kind of learned to put up with it after all these years. But there's some cop shows who also will remain nameless where they like to have characters talking and conveying background information in a workout scene in the gym at the beginning. And then they do what's supposed to be a roundhouse kick. The problem with the roundhouse kick is they're still facing each other at the beginning and end of the kick, face to face, straight on. And they kind of, the kicking one kind of brings a leg up and around and hits the side of the kicking shield, and then they're done. And I'm looking at that and thinking, that's not how I learned to do a roundhouse kick.
Why didn't you pivot your hips? Where is the turn? That kick has no power.
Where's your power?
Yeah, exactly. But that's why people should not use TV for their research for these things.
Yes.
One of the best ways of learning that is to work with a high-level martial artist. When I was doing Taekwondo, I was working with Roseanne Di Tommaso, who is about 5'4", but she's also a sergeant on the Charlotte SWAT team. And one of the things I found very interesting about Roseanne, I'm 6', 210, is that she would never trade with me because she was too smart to do that. Sometimes I think we see a lot of unrealistic girl power stuff in martial arts because it's popular, but it's not necessarily real. Roseanne would pick her moment and she would go in and hit a target very specifically. And she was extremely technically proficient, one thing she said is that, in martial arts, women have to be, as in dance, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in heels. She has to do everything I do, only with more finesse and maybe that higher degree of accuracy. Because like the standard chicken wing thing, I can almost always get out of that with most martial artists. But Roseanne was a cop and she did it every day as if her life depended on it. And I knew if my arm was back there, because it did, exactly, that if I twitched wrong, I could break my own arm. So, she wouldn't swing at me big. She wouldn't, try and trade, because that's a losing proposition. And it's a losing proposition whether I'm facing a 6'8" person or she's facing, somebody 6 inches bigger. Size and heft make a difference, and you have to account for it. You have to be realistic about it. Sometimes there's a little too much magical thinking in martial arts. And there are people that come into martial arts and think, oh, I'm a black set, so I can fight the leader of the street gang over there. Well, he's a practical martial artist. He can take pain, he can handle fear, and he knows what hurts. So don't think that your school credentials make you something different on the street. What you say, Brian?
Yeah, and that's something too, where because I had to do the different forms of jujitsu, I also fought some MMA. And I would look at some of these MMA guys and I'd say, you don't realize you're dead meat if you get into a practical fight. What are you going to do? Go to the ground? If you're involved in an altercation with someone in a bar, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the ground, pull them into your guard and put them in a rear naked? No, you're not. You're going to die.
Yeah.
I remember all these people sitting there saying, oh, this guy I'm going out with, he's a cage fighter. And that's supposed to impress me. Why? Because I already know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to try to shoot into my legs because he thinks he's going to take me to the ground. As soon as he does, I am going to sprawl back, drop all of my weight on his weak side shoulder, and I am going to try to pop it. And then I'm going to switch around and I'm going to catch him in a choke.
Yeah.
Either that or I'll just elbow him in his spine.
Yeah.
There's a big
I saw him do that. Well,
there's a big difference between self-defense and regular martial arts practice, which was shown in, I think it was a National Geographic special. They had the football player and an MMA guy, and he was being taught by a Krav Maga guy, and the Krav Maga guy has a knife, and the MMA guy shoots, grabs his leg, and the Krav Maga guy goes like
stabs him in the back. Yeah.
No, a great deal about martial arts and nothing about self-defense.
One of the challenges here is a lot of schools, the fault is really in the school. A lot of schools tell the students that this stuff works all the time. And because, in class people are cooperative, it tends to. Or they fight the type of fight that their martial artist is intended to fight. Like somebody who's an Aikido black belt going out into the street and dealing with someone who's a street brawler. That Aikido guy is probably going to be in the ER really quickly. That's one of the biggest problems I encountered when I was teaching martial arts history at Temple. We had students from all different martial arts who would take the class, and they would assume each one assumed that their instructor was not only teaching them the truth, but that their instructor knew the truth. Mm-hmm. And we start with just like a kata, like here, take this move in a kata, tell me what it means, what it does. And very often they either didn't know what the technique was, didn't know that the technique had been modified for the kata for A, its aesthetics, and B, to fool people watching so they couldn't learn from, just observing. And they thought that the technique as shown is the version that's going to work, as opposed to the adaptive necessity of fighting someone who doesn't match that or doesn't do that. And people get into trouble when they get into fights, and their characters, if they're writers, wind up doing things that are impossible.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like Nancy said, you get those completely unrealistic situations. And Lee mentioned it too. And this is one thing that I really think is key, is that, you've all mentioned a street brawl is definitely different than, doing kata in the dojo. But one thing I often see that makes me just shake my head is, and Lee, your point was made earlier about this, is weapons of opportunity. You see characters in stories, I'm ready to fight you. It's like a manga overlay with, the voiceover, I am ready to fight you. And, why don't you just pick up a brick and hit him with it?
Right.
It's right there.
Right.
I've
But
always,
instead, they're like, I will do my choreographed fight scene now.
Right.
I've always believed and followed the Heinlein School of Weaponry, which is anything that comes to hand in the crunch.
Mhm.
Mhm.
There's
It's
a
very
difference
true.
between practice, and this guy's going to do you harm if he's still standing
Mhm.
after the first engagement.
There's no referee in the street.
Yeah.
No, you
And
put them down however you can.
Mhm.
yeah, there's a sub art in jiu-jitsu. It has different versions in different other arts. In jiu-jitsu, we call it hidaku kurosu, the art of the naked kill, using any object that you pick up as a weapon. The reason it works so well, and this is something that a lot of people don't get, it's not about the technique you learn. It's about understanding the principles that make that technique work. Your psychology, their psychology, your body, their body, your physics, your shared physics, the technique. I mean, I've never once in all the fights I've been in had somebody throw a technique, a punch at me or a kick at me that resembled what I studied in its pure form in the dojo. Not once.
Right.
It's
Right.
always different. So if you are learning, if the emphasis is on the technique, like the way that roundhouse you were talking about earlier, if the emphasis is on the technique, not on how it works or why it works, the choreography is going to be silly. The execution in the book is going to be easily, visible as something by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. And anyone who reads it who does know what they're talking about, they've probably closed the book at that point. And that's really on the writer for not doing their homework.
Well, and I think
readers-
that's actually really to Nancy's point is if you're going to write this stuff, take advantage of things like this panel, take advantage of things like, anytime Jonathan or Ed or Brian or Lee or Nancy are talking about this and talk to people who've done it. Every dojo I've ever been in, from the ninjutsu one to the jujitsu one I did just a little bit of, and my taekwondo, my instructor would have sat down with me for coffee and talked over fight scenes probably for hours if I had wanted to. And so between conferences and panels like this one, and actually just asking someone, please do your homework, because as you said, Jonathan, the theory doesn't, and even the, nice clean white uniform in the dojo, going through all your kata and going through all your forms, that doesn't teach you about down and dirty street fighting. And even if your dojo has a self-defense class, it generally doesn't take into account the adrenaline and fear and all of that.
The one thing I loved about my dojo, I studied under Hanshi Larry Sullivan in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. And Hanshi always said, look, you work in a jail. So the way I'm teaching you is for you to survive if something happens in that day room. And I've had a lot of instructors in my day. He is the only one that actually understood protecting yourself, period. From the self-defense list, even some of the self-defense lists in the early on, that's the stuff for doing in the dojo. But even the way he taught it, it would have some sort of practical use. Kempo was probably the only martial art that I learned that what you learn in the dojo on the mat, if you are faced with having to use it in the street, it can be effective. And I think it was the way he taught it. And even, from what Jonathan said about someone throwing that high kick, I remember almost getting into a fight with a kid when I was like 17, 18 years old. And he called when, we're doing the banter that boys do. We're about to fight. And he's like, oh, you don't want to see me when I'm in my dojo. And he starts throwing high kicks. And I'm like, and you're already dead. What are you doing? So yeah, you if you want any sort of credibility with your writing when it comes to martial arts, leave the high kicks in the crappy movies.
And there are some other things that you can bring into it. There's the coppery taste in your mouth when you get hit and the skin gets abraded against the teeth. If you get
tears in your eyes, the tears in your eyes from the nose shot.
And you get the nose shot, there's that warm flood that goes down the front of your face. You're stopping a big move like this, especially against a big guy, you may feel your arm go kind of numb. So those little bits of underlying verity, if they get into the writing, make the reader feel that at least the author has some idea of what's actually going on here. They're conveying those essential details that sort of say, like I parachute jumped a couple of times, and one time I was upside down and I snapped like this when the chute went open. And I've had a lot of guys come up to me and go, yeah, that sensation when the straps go right up between the legs and it jerks you and your head snaps, you know, because I put that in there. It spoke to them, you know, they established that, you know, a little bit, you know, you don't want to make it so much that everybody has to be a member of the club, because we're not commandos, you know, we're writers. But, you know, having a little bit of verity goes a long way.
Can I just throw one thing on top of that, and then I'll be quiet for a while. When you were talking about getting hit, you know, and so on, that's one thing that you rarely see in fight scenes is the emotional connection to the physical trauma. Like if a guy gets hit in the nose, right, the amount of pain, you know, is something that the blood eustachian tubes is a factor, because it cuts down on wind as well as is scary and choking and so on. But above that is the fact that most people haven't been hit like that. Most people haven't been hit with the emotionality of somebody wanting to hurt them. That becomes a traumatic scene that's hugely great for character growth. And also, we tend to hang emotions on physical phenomena. So if you've never been hit in the nose before and you get hit in the nose in a fight, your eyes are going to tear. It's nature's defense to get rid of debris in the eyes. We want, you know, deep inside, we are trained to put a definition and a reason for everything. So if we're crying in the middle of a fight, we are afraid. We feel weak. We feel cowardly. A lot of people lose the fight because of their emotional reaction in the moment, rather than might not even be a lack of skill. You don't see enough of that. And that's something that I love putting in books. And I love when other writers put in books, that it isn't just a trading of blows. It's two personalities at war with one another. And that's character development. It's gold for character development.
Robert Parker used to do a pretty good job of that.
Yep. And John D. McDonald with Travis McGee.
Well, I mean, Mike Tyson said it best. Everyone's got a plan until they get hit. And that's absolutely accurate. And you're right. There are some people, as soon as they take that first shot, they've already lost, because they don't want that getting hit again. That's why in my younger days, I would actually let the person I was fighting land one, just to see if I wanted to keep going. So it's like, hey, look, if you take their best shot, they're not going to want to fight anymore. And if you are able to take that best shot, that's a confidence builder. Now, I'm not suggesting leading with your face, because that's dumb. That was back when I was young and dumb. That's back when I was young and dumb. Now it's just, you better get your damn guard up. let them punch at your arms and get tired.
Right.
Well, and I'm sure that Lee and Nancy can speak to this too. If you're writing this sort of thing, you also have to remember to take into consideration what it's like to be a woman faced with a larger opponent in a scary situation. All of the things that everybody mentioned, you've got the adrenaline, you've got fear, but women tend to live in a space of hyper awareness and a tinge of fear virtually all the time in a strange situation. So the other thing can also be overreaction. And in certain circumstances where you know a martial art and you know how to protect yourself, and somebody tries to scare you, you can
It's not too good for them.
It's never good for them.
My Hanshi would have the women spar with me to perfect their technique. And all of the women would say, well, he's going to hurt me. And he go, no, he's not. He was like, you can do whatever. He'll go just hard enough for you to learn your technique. But if you hit him, it's okay. And I'm like, why are you telling him it's okay to hit me? But it was true. Like, there was one woman, oh, she didn't have any qualms. Oh, I can hit him. Bam. Like, God damn.
But the thing is, that actually makes my point. Women almost need permission to hit somebody.
To hit someone, yeah.
And all of us as writers have to be aware that women have an innate sense of, unless you've been training with the kind of sensei that Bryan is talking about, where they're like, no, you've got to overcome that. So if it comes to an actual street fight or somebody is actually trying to grab you, you don't hesitate. Because as women, we're polite, especially Southern women, we're polite. We don't want to hurt anybody.
That was a
And
big
is this
point.
really a bad situation, or is it just somebody trying to scare me? Because that happens all the damn time.
You try.
That's a big point Roseanne used to make all the time, that women start from position of being socialized against violence. And I've had the good luck to work with a couple of very good female seafoods, including the one kind of kicked my ass, kicked my butt into getting my black sash. And what you saw is that they had to overcome that. And I do a lot of what Bryan does because I'm good size and I'm very careful. I tend to spar a lot with the female students to get that confidence building of how to work around a large body. But one of the things I do find is I have to really encourage them to throw a punch at me, because again, their whole socialization is in the opposite direction. Unless, you know, you grow up in a bad neighborhood.
Or you grow up with brothers.
Yeah, well,
There you
yeah,
go.
there's that.
Well, yeah, because I know my cousin, she came to me and said, you know, I'm going to be a troop leader for the Girl Scouts, and I'd like you to teach them self-defense. And some of their parents will, you know, some of their moms will be there. I'm like, all right, good. And then I'm starting to think, well, what's my lesson plan going to be? All right, lesson number 1, don't be afraid to hit somebody. Mm-hmm. Granted, you don't want to encourage kids to hit somebody, but if someone makes you have to defend yourself, don't hesitate. And I think that that's something as a society that we've kind of fallen away from. And I think that, you know, with my dojo, Infinity Academy, I've been saying my main thing is to help everyone become the infinity version of themselves. And that includes, and I plan on working specifically with women and LGBTQ+, because I tell people, folks are crazy out here. And they seem to think that they have the right to put their hands on your body. I'm planning to teach you that they don't. You can say no. And if words won't work, they will be sorry that they didn't. Period.
That was actually the
Well,
best
my
lesson.
dad-
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
That was
Well,
the best lesson that doing ninjutsu taught me. Is ninjutsu's theory is basically let your opponent think he's winning and then kill him. And I was able to overcome the sort of conditioning from Taekwondo of it being more of a sport, more of a classical, let us spar now and we will be awarded points. And, you know, and ninjutsu is like, yeah, no, just kill him.
Well, one of the
Take them out,
does-
end it.
one of the challenges when writing this, though, is too often fight scenes do not have consequences. Two people get in a fight, they're going to, I mean, we're a litigious society. There's laws that are different in city, state, and federal. There's your own history against you, the amount of damage based when compared to the amount of threat. Like if somebody's trying to steal your purse and you crush his throat, that's an inappropriate response. That person is actually going to probably go to jail for that. Also the psychological effect of I just hurt someone, or I was just hurt by someone, or I was in a fight. All of that should chase the character through the book. And that goes back to what I said earlier, but I hate fight scenes that are just like an action oasis. It's an opportunity for us to create real world circumstances, consequences for our characters to have to deal with, which only deepens the tension within the story and only improves the story arc. And if we don't do that, then we're, you know, even if we write a realistic fight, we're not writing a realistic fight scene in a realistic world.
Even in a science fiction environment, like on the space station or something of that nature, you know, one of the things that we as martial artists know is that there's almost no leave to kill in this. It's like very, very few fights end up going to the death, and we don't in fact usually train to do that unless you're, again, commandos, special forces, things of that nature. You're not going to have the leave to kill, and as you say, the consequences of this will trail you. So in fact, most fights are relatively short duration scuffles. The first guy or girl that is bleeding from the nose, you know, usually quits at that point. Now, when you get into professionals trying to do this in more of a military action adventure scenario, yeah, that's a different thing. There, I think probably the thing that bothers me the most is the person that gets knocked out, as you say, no consequences, no sequelae. If you've knocked somebody out, you're 95% of the way to having killed them. And, you know, ration your character's heroics. If you've got 5 books and they've been knocked out 15 times in the course of them, They probably are eating Jello with a spoon and need, depends at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, in two of my books, one is a sci-fi military thriller. The other one is a vampire novel. In an actual practical, real world, everyday people novel, the lead character in the first chapter, he's a corrections officer. A guy comes after him with a shank. He kills him with a palm strike to the nose and kills him. What happens? He goes on trial.
mhm.
He went on trial because, like you said, in the real world, there are consequences to everything that you do. That's why my instructor, my Hanshi, he taught me and a few other people open hand techniques, but for other folks, it's closed hand techniques. I mentioned that to someone. They said, well, why? And I said, because you realize you can kill someone with an open hand technique.
Yeah,
with a closed
particularly
fist.
this
You
one.
get lucky if you cause that kind of damage. Oh, I never thought of that. Yeah, that's why you don't just teach somebody coming off the street.
Yeah,
Anything
one of the
open.
more interesting moments was somebody asking me in class if I could teach them the death touch, and I said, A, there's no such thing, and B, if there was, I assuredly would not teach it to you.
Because you asked for it.
Because you asked for it, yes.
Well, it's just like I tell my son is going for he's 12 years old. He's going to be going for his black belt in January. And I told him, when you get your black belt in this art, I'll start teaching you. Like, I taught him some stuff to get ready for his black belt, but he even asked me when he was 5, Dad, when can I start learning how to fight? I said, when you're older and when I can trust you, because he didn't understand that answer. I said, look, moms and dads that are black belts, it's hard for us to teach our kids. So I would rather you learn from somebody else and then come to me when you're older. And well, when can I learn how to do all the things that you can do? When you reach my age and older, because some of this stuff, it comes with training and experience. I'm not going to teach you how to take another man's life. I'm not.
Family members should probably not teach each other martial arts or how to drive stick,
No,
I would
not at all.
actually take exception with that just a little bit.
Go ahead.
When I was 12 years old, my father, who had served in the United States Navy and had 2 daughters, decided it was time we knew a few basic things. Why then? I don't know. But he said, I'll show you some things. And
The
one
fact
of
that you were becoming a teenage girl might have
Yeah.
had something to do with it.
maybe
yes.
so. And I'm the older, so I was the one about to be the teenager. And he showed us how to, when somebody grabs you from behind, do the shirt throw across your hip. And the third time we did it, he went sailing down the living room and hit the sofa. And we looked at each other, and it was hard to tell which one of us was more astonished that A, this had actually worked, and B, I had followed through on it. And even though I never had any trouble in high school, I was lucky. I know a lot of girls aren't so lucky. It was nice to know I could do that if I had to. And he also taught us the importance of knowing where the package is and what to do to it. And so just knowing that when you're walking in the dark by yourself, like when you get into college, it's nice to know you know just that little bit of it. He was not qualified to teach us anything advanced, and I'm sure that he learned that basically in the Navy and was just sharing that with us. But I do think sometimes it's a good idea to teach your kids a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's why I told my son, get your rank in this art first. And then I told him, I said, think of it like this is your grade school and high school. Dad will be your college.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, one thing also that is important, and I know it's a bit of a topic change, but when we're writing fight scenes, we have the same obligation to our readers we have with our students, and to teach them what actually does and does not work. And there's a lot of mythology out there about what does and does not work. There are techniques that people have claimed are lethal techniques or do this and do that, and they don't do that if you know your physiology. And it's a bit of a problem because, for example, I was reading just recently reread Stephen King's Firestarter, and the assassin the assassin was contemplating hitting someone to drive the nose bone into the brain, which is physiologically impossible. You see it in the movie The Last Boy Scout. Bruce Willis does it. Physiologically impossible. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it can do damage. Yes, it'll do all sorts of damage. Not going to kill anyone. There's no nose bone. There's no path for fragments of the cartilage.
Yeah,
to go up.
there's no communication between the brain and
Right.
right.
So, but it's taught. It's taught over and over
Sure.
again. Because it's generationally taught in martial arts, we have no reason to doubt it from our instructor. Just like the death, the death palm that you were talking about earlier. Yes, there are myths in how that got started. There are legends, and probably somebody maybe did get killed with a single blow, and but accidents happen. Shit happens. Doesn't mean that it's an actual technique that's reproducible and something you should be teaching. But people just don't know the friggin' anatomy. They don't know. One of the best things that a writer can do if they don't know the anatomy, go take an ER doctor out for beers and just pick his brain. Do ride-alongs with cops. They'll always let a writer do that. Go talk to people in special forces. Or SWAT teams. They'll answer your questions. If I'm going to write about nuclear reactors, I'm not going to assume I know enough because I used to live near one. I go and ask a nuclear engineer about it. If I'm going to do an autopsy, just because I've seen a lot of episodes of CSI doesn't mean I can write about that. I want to actually talk to a pathologist. People should talk to experts about this. People writing fight scenes should talk to lawyers, they should talk to psychologists, and they should talk to ER people to find out what actually happens.
And even such easily accessible things as cops. One of the things you see there is the sheer level of exhaustion that occurs in trying to bring down, particularly somebody that's drugged or drunk out of their mind. You're hanging on them, you're hitting them, it's not adding up. I saw one, it's 5 big beefy cops and a dog, and it took forever to bring down this one skinny crazed redneck. And I was just looking at the physical effort involved that everybody, could barely stand after this. I'm sorry, you were going to say something, Lee?
I was just going to say, I'd love to hear from Lee, her perspective about being in a position where not only female, but also, with other challenges.
I was lucky. When I was in grade school, I was the target of bullies. I had an Irish granda who took me out to the barn, showed me how to alleviate the situation, and gave me permission to defend myself. Since he was raising me, okay, granda, that works for me. Basically, I've had to prove myself. On that other note, though, we've been talking about things that writers should learn and so forth. I'm going to suggest that they actually get their hands dirty. Go to the firing range, rent a pistol.
Yep.
Ask an instructor to show you the ropes. Feel what it's like when that semi-auto kicks back. Get a revolver. Find out what that kick is like. Go to the YMCA. Get your hands on, sign up for one of their
get some gloves
fencing
on and headgear.
classes. Go to the SCA. Watch, learn, soak up the environment is half of it.
Yeah,
And-
writers' conferences, like Nancy said, Dragon Con. Sit in on those panels.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, that
And-
and get in on doing it.
I think
Some
Lee is
dojos will
Absolutely.
also let people sit in on a free class. I
Sure.
know.
Oh, I taught my son the joy of keeping your guard up. I was holding the pads for him, and every time he threw that hook, I said, "Boy, you better get that hand back." He kept dropping. I said, "Next time you drop it, I'm gonna catch you." He dropped it. Now I didn't hit him hard, but I caught him quick enough, and he started crying. I said, "Now, are you crying because you're hurt or because you're scared?" And he goes, "You scared me. I didn't even see it coming." That's why you get your guard. You get back to your guard. You throw your strike, bring it straight back. You leave it down. Now, what if I was hitting you with a punch? I just caved in half your skull. What you gonna do then? He goes, be knocked out. And that's how you get CTE.
I'll
But I think
endorse
at
also
least-
what Lee was saying about, if you go to the range, there's a whole set of smells and feelings and tastes that are associated with using these weapons. The oil that's on them, again, the coppery taste and smell that's in your
The
nose and mouth.
anticipation of the noise.
Yeah.
The feel.
the feel, the how your hands, from how that vibration from your wrist to your elbow to your shoulder, from the 9 to the 40, the shotgun.
Yeah, there's a very, very, very funny, in my mind, and I'm sure it would be to you all, scene with a very fragile, maybe 5 foot, 100-pound soaking wet actress in a movie where she racks a 30-aught shotgun and says, she fights back with the only thing she knows how. And I'm thinking, she'd find that thing, she'd be in the next zip code.
Age 12, both barrels of a 12 gauge.
Yeah.
My
And-
fluffy buns on the grass.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Did you put it on your hip or?
No, I was
Well,
on
yeah,
my
well-
shoulder. But
Oh.
I
or where they
was,
show these gangsters with the weapon.
Oh
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
I
I'm
get
like, are
so
you serious?
sick of that.
Yeah.
So
You-
sick of it.
Some
could not
villain
hit a
with a big frame
rhinoceros with it.
revolver, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be on your face.
Or
Smack
better
you in
yet,
the
just
face.
this. Just this. There's a
Yeah.
reason why you hold like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lee is absolutely on target there. You know, a dojo of any school is going to let you take a free class, sit in there and watch them do practice. But like Lee said, get your hands dirty. Go take a class.
Yeah.
One of the-
And
one of
And
the
the,
things-
the opportunity of
sort of
writing a
sword
scene,
feels like.
the opportunity of writing a scene where a character actually thinks they know something because they've seen it in movies or whatever, and it not working for them would be friggin' hilarious.
Oh
It
God,
was.
yes. I'm actually working. I'm actually I'm going for my master's, so I haven't had a lot of time for writing because of it. But I was working on a story where, your everyday Joe, he meets a woman, and it turns out that he doesn't realize until after they've been married that she's an assassin. So he calls himself trying to help her. At one point, the one scene that came to mind was he had to skydive, and he's like, well, I've seen this in the movies a ton of times. How hard could it be? And then he jumps out. Ah! And he goes, now he's telling the story of how it happened. He goes, I was a little nervous, but I think I handled it. And the guy who's interviewing him goes, well, actually, we have a recording of it, and it sounds like this, and it's him just screaming. And then at one point he goes, oh man, I think I just crapped my suit. And the
There's
guy's
a lot
just-
of screaming that goes on with that particular activity.
Well, see,
Yeah.
I have no desire to ever to do that, because
Yep.
if God meant for my big old behind to be up in the sky like that, I'd have wings coming out my back, or I'd be a bird.
Then
Well,
don't do what I did, which was date a parachute jumper. I had to be as good a
Don't do
man
that.
as she was, and that was quite a
Don't do
struggle.
See,
So
she
so-
would have just had to understand that I just understood my limitations.
But I think somebody mentioned this before, and it's probably worth, again, coming around to in terms of stuff for the writer and the reader, fatigue, particularly in working with weapons. If you pick up a fencing foil, you think, oh, well, I could go all day with this. And then about 30 minutes later, your right arm is about ready to fall off.
If you
I
make it that
remember
far.
watching Aragon fight in the Lord of the Rings in a small engagement with the orcs just at the end of the second movie. And he is moving like greased lightning. And I'm feeling horribly depressed. I'm going, I've been doing this 25 years. He's an actor. How come he's so much faster than I am? Then I found out he's using a lightweight aluminum alloy sword to weigh
And
nothing.
it's been cut and edited like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
a lot of that
so-
you see in the samurai films too, like the Zatoichi films and
Yes,
Lone Wolf.
great film.
They're very, very lightweight swords. Of course, they can do the ultra high speeds. The same weight
Right.
they use in demonstrations. I sure as hell wouldn't want to go into a fight with them. No.
No,
So
you
that-
can't.
that
As much
actually
as I
Wushu
love
weapons.
Uma Thurman and Kill Bill, I'm sorry, you ain't taking out the crazy 88. 88
So-
dudes in you. I don't care how I'm 88. I don't care who you are. Unless you Neo in the Matrix, in yet another bit of super high level fiction, you ain't taking out 88 cats.
They set such standards for us in the movies. It's like, I can leap, and I'm 63. I can leap a good 2-3 feet in the air. I've never yet made it to 10 feet. And it's like, you watch these movies and I'm looking at these people doing all these things that involve such tremendous physical strength, and they're doing it for a half hour. And I'm tired watching the first 5 minutes.
The injuries are the same way. You watch, and we'll go back to Buffy for a second. All right, if she gets thrown against the wall by a vampire, okay, she's a superhuman.
Right.
Xander gets thrown against the wall by a vampire.
He's
Cross-
done.
He gets
That's his
back up.
evening.
It doesn't make sense. I think the worst example of it I saw was in, not that it was a great film to begin with, Starship Troopers. One of the characters gets stabbed through the shoulder with a spike that's about this big. She has this huge wound, and a minute later, she's there firing a gun and fighting.
No way that would happen.
Not really. You know, bleeding out, and dying pretty quickly. Shock would be the, but you know, they think the audience is stupid, and I, as a writer, and I'm sure you guys too, don't want to assume that our readers are dumbasses. We want to respect the reader, and that makes us go up to the next level to make sure that what we write is quality and believable, and we don't make a fool of them for believing in the fiction.
Yeah,
Sometimes
Jeff,
we do
Jeff
run into the-
Speakman walking into the Taekwondo gym and just saying, "Yeah, I'll fight any of you guys and I'll win." Yeah, okay. A, you're wearing the same clothes you've worn for the last 5 days. Those jeans give you no mobility. You're just gonna walk in and take out these guys, no problem. Yeah, I don't think so. Sorry.
We do run into occasionally the fact that, and everybody here is familiar with this, truth is not a defense in fiction. I mean, you get a Eugene Sledge, or I forget the other name of the Marine, who was actually holding a 30 caliber machine gun and firing it blind, as the Japanese swarm too. Those things actually do happen in reality, but they almost always happen among professional warrior class people that are well under 25 in the prime of their life and in the most extreme of circumstances. But if you drag it into fiction, then it becomes too much Lost in Space, or as you say, Starship Troopers, and it just doesn't work. So in a way, sometimes we actually have to write a little below what's actually possible for, you know, a 20-year-old terrified out of his mind, hyped on adrenaline, you know, who doesn't even notice that the skin on his hands is burning off because there's no jacket on the 30 caliber. That's really tough. If you bring in too much reality, you sometimes can't sell it, because the real things people do are sometimes more amazing than anything we can get away with writing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we could probably go for another hour if we ask a couple more questions, but we will stop right here. I do want to go around again and have everyone tell us where we can find you or your books. I'll start with you, Lee.
My work can be found, just Google Lee Martindale at Amazon, Barnes Noble, my own shop, Harphaven Merchanter, or just go to harphaven.net. There are links at the top.
All right, perfect. Nancy.
You can find me on my website, nancynorthcott.com. I spend far more time than is good for me on Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott, and I occasionally remember that I have a Facebook page. But it's probably easier to find me via my website or via Twitter. And my latest release is historical fantasy, which does not have any martial arts in it, only magical arts, called The Steel Rose from Falstaff Books.
All right, Bryan.
You can find my books on my publisher site, randomevolved.store. You can get my books, Invincible Heart, Unbreakable Mind, parts 1 and 2 of the John Baker Chronicles, as well as my book, The Enforcer, the first book in the Path of Redemption series. As far as shooting the breeze with me, if you even want to go that route, you can find me on Twitter at Bryan Tann Author. You can also find me on Facebook there as well. And you can also, if you search Infinity Academy, that is my Facebook group for my dojo as well, where I also offer virtual DDP yoga workouts. And yeah, I'm also available for one-on-one self-defense and DDP yoga instruction here in the Pittsburgh area.
Jeannie?
Oh, me, sorry.
I know it's late.
1 o'clock in the morning in Scotland where I am.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm
Good
a
Lord.
little slow on the uptake. I'm Jeanne Adams. You can find me at jeanneadams.com. And like Nancy, I spend far too much time on the hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter. You can also find me, wherever books are sold, and you can find me here on ConTinual as well.
Ed?
I'm carried by Copper Dog Publishing, among others, and everything I do is available on Amazon. See some of them here. I'm on Facebook, probably, as you say, more than is good for me. I sometimes stumble around Twitter, not really enjoying the experience, but you can find me that way. Best way to contact my work, which is available in hardcover, print, some of it's in audio, and all of it's electronic, is through Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
And finally, Jonathan.
Just search on my name, spell my last name right. It's Maberry, not May. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the sites, and I'm pretty active on social media. I have a website, jonathanmaberry.com. And if you're writers watching this, on my website, there is a page called Free Stuff for Writers. It has, a comic book script, one of my Captain America scripts, and how to write a synopsis, sample of a query letter, whatever you need, go grab it. It's all free PDFs. And, my books are everywhere. And join me on Thursdays at 4 Pacific time for my Ask Me Anything I do every week. We just basically do that, Ask Me Anything.
All right, perfect. And I do want to thank all of you for joining us and everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
This was fun.
Thank you.